Well, hello out there, Boomer Time family, and Happy New Year. I have some exciting news for you for 2026. It's Nancy Cogar, your elder law and estate planning attorney and advocate, long-term care planning and caregiving preparation. I aim to help you with that. And I've got a great new tool coming out that you are absolutely going to want to have. It's a book. It's called Boomer Time Blueprint, and it does just that. It offers a blueprint for how you can get prepared. It also offers chock full of information and resources because you know that I love resources, and it will help with some of those stubborn folks who don't understand or don't think that what you're trying to do for their plan is important. It will show you why you need things, when you need them, and what may happen if you don't have it. So look out for Boomer Time Blueprint. And I am excited to get that in your hands. You can reserve a copy at nancycogar.com. Well, hello there. Nancy Cogar here, and this is Boomer Time. You know, we're talking about aging, we're talking about planning, we're talking about issues that can come up with estate planning and as you age. Hey, this stuff can be really dramatic. I wanted to touch on the issues of bad actors and inheritances. You got somebody who, take for instance, the Rob Reiner situation out in California, right? His son is accused of killing both Rob Reiner, his father, and his mother. We've been hearing all kinds of things about, his history, his possible mental illness, drugs. The other thought, though, with these cases is, Rob Reiner obviously was a very successful actor, producer, director. He has, I'm sure, an enormous estate. And administering those estates is complicated, right? Just on its own, related to the dispositions, the amount of money, the taxes that may be involved. But what about a beneficiary that's in your will that does something bad? Okay, the worst thing you could do, right, is murder your parents. And unfortunately, this happens. I don't want to say a lot, but there have been cases of it, right? We see Rob Reiner. That's the most recent one. We see the Menendez brothers. Remember those two? And they were just in the news recently. Pamela Smart. These are people that were involved with and convicted of murdering their parents. Their parents were very successful and they did something violent against them. So what happens in a circumstance like that? Can they be disinherited? Can they make a claim in the estate? You might be surprised, but there are laws that specifically deal with this. I know I've talked about it before too. Laws that if you got a problem child, I'm not talking criminal, but say there's a problem with them managing money, right? Or needing help with just basic living skills. Those things can be addressed in an estate plan. I recommend that you do it. Keeping the hands off the money. You worked hard for this stuff, right? So you can give money to someone that has those kind of issues, but you just need to be specific about planning them. Now, crimes, if you're convicted of a crime, especially an intentional murder, there are actually state laws across the country that bar someone, son, daughter, whoever it is, that's, might be a natural heir to someone. If they kill the decedent or the parent, rather, in this instance, they can be barred from receiving any inheritance. And that's regardless of whether there's a will or a trust that provides for them, but also if there isn't. The state law, upon a conviction like that, will step in and just prohibit them from inheriting. Now, you don't want things like that to happen, but sometimes they do. And it's been, you know, so complex. Take the Menendez brothers, for instance. They were barred from inheriting their estate when they went to prison. Um, I would imagine as we move forward with this Rob Reiner case that some of those things are going to come up. Do you know somebody that maybe was disinherited for committing a crime? There's lots of states, including here in Tennessee, that will bar people from inheriting. They call them Slayer statutes. Slayer statutes. And they just, upon that conviction, may lose their inheritance rights. There are some other ways, which I think really are probably more prevalent and possible to come up. Take financial abuse, negligence, things like that come up. And that can lead to some of the same things on the civil side. So I wanted to take a look at some of those. All of it's bad. And it's important, though. So that's why I wanted to touch on this today. Along with, just stressing the importance of planning specifically. You can do that. You have the power to do that, regardless of all these other things. But what are you going to do? What kinds of issues may come up? Hey, if you're out there and you're thinking, my kid's a mess, right? My kid's a mess. They cannot manage money. They're on drugs. Can't keep a job. I've heard it all, okay? And you are not alone. So this is an important issue to tackle. And hey, I've even talked about it before with, if someone's convicted of a felony, they can be barred from serving as your executor. So you have to know these things before you start choosing people who may not be a good fit for some of these positions. But I thought it was important to just talk on the Slayer statute, first of all. That's the most extreme, of course. And then kind of talk about some of the more possible kind of complications that can come up with inheritance. Bottom line, of course, murder is wrong, right? And that kind of thing absolutely should not be any kind of motivation for anybody to try to do anything. But there's bad people out there, and you just have to kind of think about some of these things. So, I am going to touch on some of the more civil, there's criminal and civil causes of action. So I'm going to talk about some of those civil actions. Even if you're accused of murder and convicted, then there's some civil things that can happen too. I got a good example for you, O.J. Simpson, right? So we'll be back and we'll talk about him and talk about some of the other things that may come up after this. Well, hello out there, Boomer Time family, and Happy New Year. I have some exciting news for you for 2026. It's Nancy Cogar, your elder law and estate planning attorney and advocate, long-term care planning and caregiving preparation. I aim to help you with that. And I've got a great new tool coming out that you are absolutely going to want to have. It's a book. It's called Boomer Time Blueprint, and it does just that. It offers a blueprint for how you can get prepared. It also offers chock full of information and resources because you know that I love resources, and it will help with some of those stubborn folks who don't understand or don't think that what you're trying to do for their plan is important. It will show you why you need things, when you need them, and what may happen if you don't have it. So look out for Boomer Time Blueprint, and I am excited to get that in your hands. You can reserve a copy at nancycogar.com. Welcome back to Boomer Time. Hey, that book is coming up. I am excited about it. I've been working hard on that. I want you to have those resources in your hands so that you can be more proactive about your planning, understand the importance of so many of these issues, and get yourself prepared to have a professional like me. You're in another state, find an estate planning attorney, better yet, someone who is practicing in elder law to help you with these issues. You have to be specific. They have to be personalized for your situation. And the reason is, I want you to have something in place if something happens. Life is complicated, right? And more these days, if you're not specifically addressing issues, you may have trouble with enforcing it. So I mentioned before the break, I mentioned O.J. Simpson, right? You may be too young for this, showing my age, but remember when he was acquitted criminally from that circus of a case. No matter what side you're on, it was a circus. I remember actually, I was helping an author, a reporter, journalist that was out there covering the trial. You may remember Jeffrey Toobin. You probably saw him on CNN for a while. He got into some trouble too, but I was helping him with his book related to the O.J. Simpson trial. So I was keeping an eye on it, and he was acquitted criminally, right? There was not enough evidence to hold him responsible for the murder of his wife. But that being said, that didn't end the legal disputes. So there was a civil case that was filed, okay? There was no criminal conviction, but the family came back and sued him for killing his wife and seeking civil remedies for that. So, and that Slayer statute can come back on a lower standard of preponderance of evidence, we call it. That means the weight is scaled towards proving the evidence, not like beyond a reasonable doubt. We have different kinds of standards in the law. So a lack of a criminal conviction, and of course, OJ is probably the one that had most of the money in the case, but his deceased wife's, remember the father and all that, they wanted to have a judgment against OJ for the responsibility of their daughter, sister's death. And, if that happens, and it's not just a criminal thing, it's civil. You can get disqualified if you're proven to be civilly responsible for someone's death. Other stuff is really interesting, a lot of times people will think, okay, there's no conviction. That means I can still inherit. What do we do? Not necessarily the case. Not necessarily the case. Of course, there's a whole other issue that comes up. Sometimes there can be self-defense, right? Justifiable homicide. Yeah, it just kind of depends on the circumstances. You hear that from me a lot, right? But if you say there's a circumstance with, you're defending yourself against somebody and this person is related to you in a way that you could be a beneficiary of their estate. So, I don't know, I can't think of any circumstance, but, if there's a self-defense or justifiable homicide, say they come at you with a knife and you find out that you were defending yourself or something like that, you may still be able to inherit from that estate. In this kind of case, you have a defense from disinheritance, a defense from protecting your body, right, from that person. So I don't really see that too much, but it's possible. It's in the law. And if you know of an example of that, reach out to me. I'd the thing that I see more often than not, and I've seen, unfortunately, during my time as a reporter. Remember, I told you before I went to law school, I was a reporter, and I saw some crazy things. But that whole idea of conspiring to kill somebody. Hey, like the Menendez brothers, right? They were part of their defense was that they were being abused, and so they conspired together to do something about it, i.e., kill both their parents. That's what they ended up being convicted of. So even if you're not doing the killing, you can still lose your right to inherit under the estate. Husband and wives, sometimes you've seen crazy cases like these, even on the those true murder shows, right? Someone hires somebody to get somebody, and they didn't physically commit the crime. I had a case like this that I covered in Florida, as a matter of fact. There was a ex-husband who was a mean SOB, and he continued to fight with his ex-wife. She was remarried, and they were all in Texas, Bexar County, Texas. Well, they moved to Florida. Her new husband and she moved to Florida, set up a new life. They had little babies, two little, actually, I'm trying to remember. This is a couple of years ago, folks. They had little babies, multiple ones. And so ex-husband actually ended up hiring somebody that he knew out on the golf course to hire somebody else to come rough this lady up. Then maybe that would make her stop making demands. Well, they hired somebody, and then he came out to Florida, and it was a pretty horrible, horrible case where he murdered the lady. And later on, he ran off to Mexico, and later on they did bring him back, but they found that he was guilty of conspiring with these golf buddies of this ex-husband. You never know. He admitted to doing it. But the other guy, the golfer, and all the other people that were involved, they got convicted. They got convicted as if they did the crime. So even indirect involvement can destroy inheritance rights. And folks, this extends out to elder abuse, neglect, exploitation. We're seeing more and more of this, and I touch on this often. But seniors that have family members who are in some of these positions, right, fiduciary positions, and they just plain old take advantage of their parents. There can be civil suits later on if they're criminal charges that can stem out of financial exploitation, and this can lead to disinheritance as well. It is a very complex area in the law, but I like context, and so that's why I thought it was important, since we were watching all that unfold in California related to Rob Reiner's death, and his wife's murder, just horrible, but that the son, who everybody was dealing with for a long time, may be responsible for killing them. Sometimes I've had people that have family members with mental illness. They may be on drugs, maybe they have an anger issue. And those are things you really have to address. I'm not saying from the standpoint of, something the extreme like with Rob Reiner, but you really need to address these issues so that you can deal with, a possible dispute that may come up after you're gone. right? I think it's worth it to address some of these issues, even if they're potential issues. Nobody needs to know. You've got the right to confidentiality when you're dealing with an attorney. You can talk through some of the scenarios that you may be afraid may happen, reasonable or unreasonable, right? That's the place to do it. And quite simply, you can just plain old disinherit people, but you got to express it, because that is ripe for some kind of challenge to your will, or whatever you end up using as a estate planning device. So you have to be specific. You have to say why. You have to say why you're doing this, what you might put in place, or like I said, if you don't have a relationship with somebody, but they could legally be your beneficiary, you have the right to say, I don't have a relationship with this person. They haven't talked to me for 25 years. I never see them. So it's as if we don't have a relationship, so I want to disinherit them. I mean, there's specific ways you do that, but I think those things need to be addressed. And the far extreme, of course, too, I would say that, I have people that have family members that may have mental illness, and that can be so complex. Like the Reiner family, they've now saying that they were afraid of the brother for years, that there have been incidents previously before. And, I know I've dealt with people, prior clients, that they're afraid of their family members, okay? They're afraid of what might happen. And what's a modus operandi, right, for committing a crime? Money, right? Money. So you got to address it. And I'm even if there's something that happens that creates a fisticuffs in the family after you're gone, it's better to address those things. And if someone's got mental illness, put something in place that's going to benefit them, not something that's going to lead to more problems or have them lose everything. Maybe they'd be taken advantage of, and maybe they just can't manage money, and poof, there it goes, right? So some other things, I'm just looking at my notes here, but some other things that I've kind of touched on were taking advantage of somebody. You see, this is actually a grounds for challenging a will. So they didn't have the capacity, right? They didn't have the cognitive capacity to make a will or contract, which, will serves as instructions, but trusts and things like that, I compare those to contracts. So if someone didn't have the capacity to do that, the documents may not be enforceable. So sometimes you see challenges on those sides, and you put somebody specific as 100% beneficiary in your will, and they find, someone, the other son challenges and says, dad didn't have the necessary capacity to make this document. It's a long road when you have that in a contest, but if it results in setting aside the will, guess what? That means 100% is not going to daughter or whoever it was. It's going to revert to the state law, and everybody's going to get a child share. So this is not like what I said about Rob Reiner, but it is a real issue that comes up. Important to mention. So I'm going to take a quick break, and when I come back, I'm going to talk about some other issues I think are related to this, but you're going to want to examine. And I'm going to have a resource for you on my website, nancycogar.com, that you probably want to check out and help you move through some of these issues. Okay? I'll be right back. Well, some of the things I've talked about today, especially the extremes, you may never have an instance where you need to consider some of these things. But, there may be that one person out there. Maybe I'm speaking to you, and these are really important issues that you need to look at. The other part of it, of course, is kind of the more broadly seen issues like undue influence, capacity, all these issues that can lead to either being disqualified or setting aside documents. And for that reason, I have a resource for you. It's online on my website, nancycogar.com. Matter of fact, with my book coming up, Boomer Time Blueprint, I've got a brand new section on the website where I have specifically highlighted resources that are available. And you can search those. So that should make it easier for you to find something specific to your circumstances. And of course, these are just meant to be general resources, but I want you to be able to work on your own and work through some of these issues so that you can communicate it better when you sit down with an attorney to talk about these things. I want you to be better educated and more aware of just how complicated these issues can be. So I've got it, and it's called a caregiver, maybe a caregiving issue, and family red flag assessment. Okay. So it works through control issues, isolation issues, sudden changes to estate plans or beneficiaries. These are flags, red flags, people, that can lead to problems down the road or cognitive or medical vulnerability. Like I said, lack of capacity can invalidate documents entirely if it's proven. Caregivers, there may be some risks, financial risks, undue influence, or exploitation. Unfortunately, a lot of times it's family members that are involved in these things. Power of attorney, fiduciary concerns. I touch on a lot of different things in this red flag assessment. And the reason is because I want your brain to start thinking about, is there something there that I need to prepare for that you might not ordinarily think about? So check it out. Hey, and let me know what you think of my new resource tab. I'd appreciate the feedback. So, all right. Well, I have touched on the ugly and the civil side and the criminal side today, but I think it's important to have this kind of context. You may watch a lot of those shows on TV and, wonder whatever happened with that. Or maybe somebody that goes through something like this. I think knowledge is power, and that's the reason I touch on these things, ultimately. So I'll try to come up with something more upbeat next time. But let me know your thoughts. And remember to keep an eye out for the book. I've got that book coming out very, very soon. And I would love for you to get a copy in your hands. And I think it's going to be very useful. So stick with me in the Boomer Time community. That is the best route, okay? I'll see you next time.